Want to drive faster? Listen in as Kinch Rendell, an SCCA National Trophy winner and multi-time Prosolo champion himself, interviews the best autocrossers in the land. He talks fast and drives even faster. And now here's your host, Kinch Rendell.
Again, I keep coming back to Brian Peters, and I'd like to give a big shout out to Brian Peters. Again, being the Honda fanboy.
Today's show features James Bjoin. He has 6 championships, 3 Pro Solo and 3 at Solo Nationals. You can pretty much call him Mr. S2000. The championships in STR 2016 this year, A Street in 2015, B Stock in 2013. Pro Solo, he won STR in 2016, 2011, and B Stock in 2012. He has all kinds of great insights, some of them personal for me I can tell you about, where my assumptions on driving faster cars, thinking they can do everything better than, let's say, an ST Civic. When he pointed out, no, it's going to be the acceleration zones that are doing so much better. He has insight for those of you that are driving S2000s. He breaks down his thoughts on running the BFG Rival S's, which he won on this year, the differences you might do for setup, and just what he thinks about that versus a Bridgestone RE71R. Once again, lots of good input here. He's not a big data guy, he'll point out, but he's got some great tips when it comes to doing video and how he'll do video right before or right after he takes a run. He'll check out the video. Something amazing. He goes, something I kind of struggle with and still is working on is looking ahead. Realize he has all these championships and he doesn't think he looks ahead much at all. So if you're not great about looking ahead, take note that he says he might walk the course 10 times. He's really going to memorize it and really think about what this feature is and where his braking zone may be or what he's going to carry through it. So that may help you right there. I mean, if he's truly not looking far ahead, and he said even Brian Peters rides with him and says, you got to look further ahead. He's able to be very quick. He also points out testing. You've got to do a lot of testing if you're going to be the top of the game. You go to nationals and think you're going to compete, put in the time to test. It can pay off for you. I hope you enjoy it. I really did. I've already got quite a few things I'm going to apply this next race personally. Today's guest is James Bjoin. James, welcome to the show.
I'm glad to be here.
Hey, thanks for joining us. Tell us, when did you get started in autocrossing?
I got started at the end of high school. This is probably going to date me, but that was 1995 is when I first started autocrossing.
You're a youngster. I like hanging out with youngsters. It makes me feel young. So, yeah, how did you find it? I mean, how did you find out about it right out of high school?
So I had always been a gigantic car nerd, even just during high school, like right when I got my permit. I would religiously read through like the big 3, big 4 car magazines all the time. Would love studying the stats on cars. And then when I finally got my license and started driving, I wanted to do a little bit more than just kind of know about the cars. And I went to the Chicago Auto Show. I grew up in Chicago. Went to the Chicago Auto Show, and there was a booth that the Chicago Region SCC had put up, and they were talking about it, and I'm like, wow, this is really interesting. The auto show in Chicago happens during the winter, and this driving school was in, I think it was like late March or early April, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. So I signed up for it, and that's what got me hooked.
It was an SCCA driving school?
Yeah, it was. So Chicago Region always has a driving school right at the beginning of the year, usually early April. So yeah, it was a driving school, just completely set up as a driving school. They had some of their experienced drivers come out, and I think like 80 people for the driving school spots open that you can sign up for, and yeah.
That's cool. So the booth let you know about it. And I think that's a neat way were they all novices or were some people somewhat experienced for that driving school?
It was more focused on novices from what I remember. I mean, yeah, that was a while ago. But yeah, it was, from what I remember, it was mostly focused on novices.
Nice. That's where I tell some people seat time. I like that idea, so maybe a lot of different regions should try that. At the beginning of the year, in the case of April, here we autocross most months of the year. But that'd be nice, just a beginning one, kick it off, let those people get that seat time to begin with.
Oh, absolutely. And, I mean, the thing is I think even there should be schools for. Yeah, I mean, I know that there are professional schools for that, but for a lot of regions, it'd be nice to even have like an intermediate school for people that are kind of been doing it for a while, but that want to brush up and have instructors. Regions that may not have a lot of events in a year. I know some regions really have a short span of like just 6 months of racing. So I think not just for beginners, but I think for all levels would be great. I know for Cal Club we have this really interesting school coming up. I think it was on hiatus for a year, but it's back. So I love that regions put out schools like this, because this is what really attracts people into autocross.
I like that. I've heard a Porsche club doing that. I thought it was more of a track event, but that's a neat idea. So what was that first car you brought out?
So my first car, and I still love that car dearly. It was a 1992 Nissan Maxima SE. That's what got me into cars. It wasn't really even my car. It was a car that my parents had bought that I would steal from them all the time, and that's what it was. And luckily, my dad had a thing for like machines, like fast things. He used to drive a Harley around. So when he bought the car, he wanted to get something sporty, and that's why we ended up getting that faster SE version, which thank God he did, because it made the car pretty fun at an autocross, I gotta say. Even for a four-door sedan, it was pretty quick.
And those are front-wheel drive or rear-wheel drive?
No, that was a front-wheel drive car. Front-wheel drive. Fortunately for that model, it had a limited slip viscous diff, so it wasn't as bad as an open diff. It wasn't as great as real diff, but it helped.
Nice. So the first four-door, you basically stole it. How long did you race that before you were so hooked you had to get something else?
So that was at the end of high school. I tried to go to as many events as I could that year. I think it only ended up being like another 4 events. I started school then, which was far away from home. Didn't even take a car down there. The next year, I did maybe another 2-3 events. But again, just not having a car where I was at school, I ended up getting into motorcycles for a while. I bought a crotch rocket. So actually, at that point, had stopped autocrossing for about 4 years, I want to say. 4 or 5 years, I was kind of out of it. And then at some point, the Nissan died due to, Nissan's interesting. They make pretty cool technology-related cars. They're just not so good at the longevity part of some of these technological innovations that they put in. So that kind of died an early death. And I've always been a Honda fanboy. So the next car after that was a Honda Prelude Type SH, which was the 5th generation, a 97.
And does that have the all-wheel steering or something special?
Right. So that had this really weird torque steer thing that they put in the car. On paper, it was great, and actually it worked pretty decently on the track. Unfortunately, on the autocross, I think maybe they fixed it for later versions, but the 97 was the first year they had it. And all those different, just throwing the car around, those fast changes of direction would actually confuse the unit, which would actually, it would do this whole little dance of weird noises for about 2-3 seconds, and then it would just cut out. I would get a little light on the dash that says that it wasn't working anymore. So that didn't go. I thought it was great. Again, it's going back to when I was in high school. I would read up on all these things, and on paper it was great, but in function it was left a little bit to be desired.
And if I remember correctly, something ties in here with Jason Frank in a Prelude?
Correct. So when I had that car, there was the Chicagoland Prelude Club that had just started up, and I met a bunch of great people through that, and one of which was Jason Frank, who had a similar car, 97, but luckily he had the one that didn't have the weird torque steering mechanism. met Jason a couple times, told him he should come out, and actually we had an event that was right on the border of Chicago and Wisconsin, the Milwaukee area, and they came out and they saw me autocross the car, and they're like, "Oh, that looks like fun." So after that, Jason started getting into it, and he's just as much into having the autocross bug as I am.
I have to thank you for having to compete against him.
Well, it's weird. Although Jason got into it, I don't think we've ever directly competed against each other, to tell you the truth. For whatever. Back then, my car was classed in STX, and his was an STS. So yeah, we not had actually. Now that I think about it, I don't think we have ever competed against each other. Which hopefully one of these days we will. That'll be good.
Be like, let me co-drive that front-wheel drive car. Oh wait, you told me before we started recording, you're the pure rear-wheel drive guy now.
Oh yeah. No, no offense to people that love front-wheel drive cars. There are some great examples of good front-wheel drive cars. I think the Type R, which you have experience with, the Integra Type R, is one of, if not the best front-wheel drive car ever. But, outside of those, few examples, I just think there's kind of a purity in terms of driving something that drives just the rear wheels. And, I don't want to go backwards in my driving progression. I want to go forward.
So you're saying I might have a chance of beating you if I stick you in a front-wheel drive car?
Most likely, probably.
That'd probably be the only chance.
I remember back when Ken Motnishi used to have his old STS Civic, I took a run in it, and it was dismal. I didn't really understand this whole thing of, like, as soon as it starts, you chuck it, let the rear slide out, and then when it points in the right direction, you just got to floor it kind of thing. I didn't get the timing down right. I must have spun it like 8 times before I finally actually came back.
Well, I was told the GT3 should be like that. I'm supposed to lift, it's supposed to rotate, I'm supposed to plant my foot again, and it's just not. It's still not equating to me.
No, I think if you drove a GT3 like a Civic, you'd be in a world of hurt. So again, driving a lot of rear-wheel drive cars, the good thing about doing that is you start picking up the nuances of a lot of these different chassis, and I love that 911 chassis. I love, there's something different about having the engine hung in the back. But the thing is with all that momentum in the back, you got to be real careful. You can let it kind of step out just a little bit if you catch it quick enough. But if you get a little bit of momentum going and you don't catch that quick, that thing's just going to it just gets worse and worse and worse. So, yeah, definitely don't want to drive it like a Civic, my personal opinion.
I probably still am, and thus am not very competitive. So what was you had the Prelude. What car was after that? Because at some point here you went to rear-wheel drive.
Well, so again, being the Honda fanboy, this was right around the time when the S2000 came out, and man, I was just wowed. That's right around the time that I started coming to more autocrosses. I think this was back in like 2001, I want to say, is when I started autocrossing back in the Chicago region, and when I came back, there were a whole gaggle of S2000s already running. And for me, again, Honda fanboy, love the VTEC. I see VTEC with the rear wheels going, and the car is just beautiful. And to see it on the autocross, the S2000, it may do great on a track, but autocross is its home. And watching that, it amazed me. And back then, they were really expensive cars. Try to even get a ride in one, let alone like drive one, was not easy to do. One of my best friends from college, who we still talk regularly, and I still see him all the time. His name is Paul Crisosimo. He just decided to buy an S2000 one day, and lucky for me, I was able to co-drive with him for a couple of years, and that's what got the rear-wheel drive bug in me started. And I mean, I've still been driving this car almost 15 years, and I still can't get away from this platform. There's very few cars I've driven so far that are better than this. I drove the Corvette last year, and I mean, all that power is fun, but the S2000 just has such a good balance between power and finesse. And again, that's probably why I still, grin every time I can nail down a good run in my S2000.
So tell me that, did you start with the AP1 when you were co-driving?
Yes. Back then it was an AP1, correct.
All right, so as a guy that owns at least one of those, break down for us your thoughts and the difference in the AP1 and AP2. And you can do STR for them since you're in STR.
Oh, sure. I mean, the biggest difference is just the torque. I actually I still have it. Just sold it a long time ago, but I just haven't had the opportunity or the drive to sell it yet. I still have my AP1 that I bought back in, I want to say, 2007. I started STR in that car, and when I put all the parts together, and I had driven other people's AP2 S2000s, the latter generation S2000 with a 2.2-liter motor, it became very clear in a sad way that the AP1 just wasn't going to do it. The lower RPM in which the torque kicks in for the AP2 was just way better, and it would just leave me in the dust all the time. The other issue with the AP2 is, you kind of get limiter more than the AP1 because it has a higher rev line in second gear, higher gearing in second gear, but because you don't even have the power to get all the way up there, you're hardly ever getting into limiter in the AP1. So that torque difference is gigantic, which is kind of sad because I actually still love driving the AP1. I still love 9,000 RPM. It still has kind of a twitchier rear suspension geometry, which I think in stock form, I way prefer the AP1 over the AP2 actually.
Oh, okay. So I wouldn't be insane if I was in stock class trying an AP1 even with less torque.
Yeah, back in the Hoosier days, the cars were kind of equal. When you can shoehorn a 245 onto a little skinny 6.5-inch wheel and get away with it. But now that things have progressed, there's just too much of a difference with the street tires.
Yeah, and the wheel width.
AP1 and AP2.
Yeah, because I forgot the wheel width is much bigger, or you get a better tire in the AP2.
Absolutely, that's what it is. So unfortunately, with that and just not being able to over tire like we used to back in the Hoosier days, the AP1 is no match for the AP2 anymore.
So I should be kicking myself because I bought an AP2, drove it. I was like, oh my goodness, why did I buy this car from an auction before driving it? The lack of the high revving. I mean, yeah, it was nice around town, but I didn't keep that car very long. I got married, and pretty quickly I was like, yeah, why do I have that sitting there? Like, And that's where some of the people... No, one thing I always thought about the AP1 after I bought this STR car was like, if I can just piggyback an ECU and throw more timing at it. I always wondered what that would get. Like, would it help with the torque? I know in the Civic when I had a borrowed Mega Squirt, it helped the torque tremendously. I think it is Jim Rianga actually has done this. I've not talked to him since he did it, but I've always been holding out hope that the AP1, just because I love that high revving like the Type R, could actually somehow compete.
Oh, I really wish so too. I just bumped into Jim at the Nationals. I didn't even know he was out of the country for a while. And he has put a piggyback Mega Squirt on it. But you know what? As the classic saying goes, there is no replacement for displacement. And 0.2 liters may not sound like a lot, but that's 10% more than the AP1, which it relates a lot. And especially it's not how much power or torque in this case that it makes, it's where it makes it. And when you're coming out of corners at 30 to 35 miles an hour, the AP1 just falls on its face, and it'll stay flat on its face until you get almost to like 45 miles an hour. Whereas right around 35 is when the AP2 starts to really wake up and just leaves the AP1 in the dust.
Yeah, I mean, the more I think about it, you just saying that makes so much sense. The 10% number after having my Civic be kind of sad this year, it's huge. I mean, it's you're not going to compete, basically. I like everybody to realize that out there. If you think you're going to compete at the top level and you're missing 5% of your power in these lower-powered cars, you're not going to be up there. It's just not going to happen that someone like James, who just won Nationals, you're not going to catch him if you're down 5% on power.
Oh yeah, if you're coming to Nationals and you only get 3 runs a day, you got to come, armed to the teeth. You have to make sure you get every pony out of that car, or you're just leaving one on the table for somebody else to come and take it away from you.
Yeah. So tell me, 15 years in S2000 platforms, what evolved? Like, were you a setup guy to begin with? At what point did you start playing with that, and what have you maybe learned and evolved in all these years setting up S2000s?
No, the setup has been more in the last 10 years. Back through 2000 to 2010, I mean, I'm not saying I make, I don't even make good money now, but back then I was dirt poor. Just having the ability through my friend Paul to drive an S2000 was huge. And back then, we just kind of scraped along on a small budget, which meant an S2000 with just the only thing we had back then was a front sway bar. Luckily for us, the stock shocks from Honda actually worked pretty well. So that's all we ran. We ran an AP1 with different front sway bar and some pimpier Japanese JDM market wheels that were a little lighter. That was it. And even then, for national stuff, and this is why I really didn't even think about doing national stuff back then, was that was all focused on Hoosiers, which, like, we looked at Hoosiers, we would see people pull in with, either their little tire trailer or their, full car trailer with their car loaded, and we would look at that and go, wow, that requires a lot just to run, these tires. We have no budget for anything like this, so we ran exclusively just the street tire class, which Chicago region had a separate, like a full pack street tire class back then. That's what we ran pretty much. I didn't really even start venturing into Hoosiers until I just started getting into the foray of national competition. Because at that point, I didn't think the extra costs and, having to have a second set of tires and wheels was worth buying a set of Hoosiers, just to go a little bit faster. I mean, I was still learning the car. And one, I guess, going back to the whole me being in this car for such a long time is, a lot of people have some apprehension with the S2000, and it's justified, because if you don't know how to drive it, it can really, bite you in the ass really quick. It's a pretty tail-happy car for compared to a lot of other cars out there. But I guess because of that, that's what's been driving me to, to go faster and faster in this car, because it's maybe it might scare some people, but for me, like, if you can master how to drive that car, then, it's bliss. When you get a good run in an S2000, you get the car to rotate where you need it to, and just pivot where you need it to, and just fly through these transitions. You come back, and like I said, 15 years later, my hands still shake when I get a good run in my car. So again, I hope they keep making good cars, but I still haven't found a car yet, other than the Mega Baller GT3 that you've also had experience with, to really say, wow, this is an awesome car. Unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because the price jump between an S2000 to a GT3 is, it's pretty tall.
It's pretty tall. And then the new one's even taller for the latest and greatest, no shifting.
Yes. Unfortunately, still shopping for a sugar daddy, but I guess I don't look as good as Scott Frazier does, so.
And you probably don't have a shop to play around as much.
Right.
Something you just said, I had heard from somebody, the progression to drive rural drive should be Miata, S2000, Corvette. You just mentioned about how you could handle an S2000, how once you learned that, and then you drove a Corvette last year. What was that? How was that like? Did you really learn enough that a Corvette was pretty easy to handle?
Surprisingly, yes. When the Corvette would start stepping out on me, I would never feel a panic or the Corvette is an awesome chassis too, but a lot of the rotation on the Corvette is driver induced. So the less you were aggressive with the throttle, the more the rear would stay put, and then vice versa. If you were really aggressive with the throttle, that's when the rear would kick out on you. Being used to the tail stepping out so much in the S2000, driving the Corvette was actually pretty easy for me once I figured out the whole probably shouldn't be power sliding through all these turns with all this power that the S2000 doesn't have.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it was basically a good progression for you because you're obviously quick in it.
No, it was. It was.
And how many events did you make in that car last year before Nationals?
I'd say, we're really lucky in Southern California as we have so many events. I'd say I probably made somewhere between 8 to 10 events. So I did get enough of a chance to get acquainted with the car, and then to kind of play with things here and there on the settings, along with my co-driver, David Howdyshell.
And did you make the practice events you guys are so lucky to have every Saturday before the Sunday events?
We definitely did some practice events. So again, David Howdyshell, he actually lives in Phoenix, but there's a contingent of Phoenix autocrossers that love to come out to our events, especially in El Toro, because we have that setup of full weekend racing where we have a practice on Saturday and then the championship part of it on Sunday. So we see Brian Peters out a lot. We see Doug Rowse, and then David Howdyshell would come out. So, I was lucky to have him come to some of those so we can kind of dial the car in. Back then, we were having this weird issue of tire size availability, where BFG had one tire out, and then the Bridgestones had a certain tire out. I mean, it was really wonky. We started out the year with RE71 squared. That taught me really fast that you got to be really gentle with the throttle. And then we were able to get BFGs for the rear, the wider sizes that the Corvette needed that Bridgestone didn't make. But BFG didn't make a good front tire size for that. So then for maybe like 3 or 4 events, we ran a hybrid setup of RE71 front and Rival S in the back. And then finally, when BFG started making the size that we needed, it was very limited when they got out. So we literally only ran 1 day on that before we went to Nationals, which kind of bit me in the ass for the finale when we did show up at Nationals. Yeah,
because you, as you said before we got recording here, you ended up winning Nationals in that car. Do you see the Pro as a great warm-up in that case, especially since you didn't have a ton of seat time in that car?
Oh, absolutely. I know some people can pull off not coming to the finale and still winning Nationals. We're really blessed. I was talking. I feel I'm starting to feel dated when I say, hey, so way back then. But back when I went to my very first Nationals, which was at the Air Park in Topeka, I don't remember there being a test and tune there. And then when we went to Heartland Park part of Topeka, where the footprint was really limited, I know for sure there definitely was not a test and tune, not like the one we have now where it's separated and you can run, all the time, during Nationals like we do now. So that's a huge blessing. But even with that being said, it's hard to gauge. I don't know. Some people say that there's a difference between the test and tune course, where that part is, and where the Nationals part is. I'm not even talking about that, but in the heat of battle amongst some of your top competitors, that's where you need to get a good gauge for where your car is. and that's what happened. I got there and I got my butt kicked by Mark Adio at the Prosolo finale, and I'm like, wow, we suck. We sucked.
But you ended up winning nationals on BFGs, that you had only tried one event before showing up at the finale?
Yeah. So that was part of it. That was definitely part of it. I just didn't. I hadn't gotten acclimated to the way that the BFGs turned in. One weird thing that has happened again this year at the Prosolo finale, and we can theorize about it, but who knows, is the same thing that happened in a different car, different class, but 2 years in a row, and it's not for one tire, because it happened both ways for RE71s and BFGs. Is a lot of us put really good times down on Saturday morning that we could not improve much faster on Saturday afternoon and then into Sunday morning. So that happened at the finale last year in A Street, and at least for me, it happened again this year in SCR. Although it was a little weird. I was part of that group that got cut off at the end of day one. I don't know. Yeah, no, you were there, Ken.
I was part of that too.
So yeah, so STX, so the last maybe like two groups of Saturday afternoon drivers, we had to run Sunday morning because that crazy storm rolled in right at the end. So that might have had something to do with it. But I mean, I won just like Mark Daddio did a year ago. He won on his Saturday morning runs the whole finale. I mean, he tried to drive faster, obviously, and same for me. I won the pro finale this year on my Saturday morning runs.
And honestly enough, or oddly enough, I did the same exact thing. I drove David Whitener's cars on BFGs, and I never matched my morning runs. Now, I got to be second driver, which usually I always try to be first driver, just if I think I'm faster, especially. But no one ever matched those times. Ron Williams came close, and yet he was running the Bridgestones, but he coned it away. But it's interesting. No one ever caught those times. I think only Jeff Wong really made up any space or any time on Sunday, which actually had two sets of runs.
Right.
That's one thing with the street tires that even David Whitener's always said about Mineral Wells. He goes, they don't speed up to actually slow down. So I know that Helan loves these Rival S's as well. I am now trying to remember the year I came in second in the challenge there. I thought I had a little bit of sand. I never broke out in the challenge. Final run, the guy on Hoosiers, he goes, oh yeah, Hoosiers get faster. He broke out by like 6 or 7 tenths or something. So there might be something to this street tire and build up on the track.
Yeah, and there could be, or maybe Purple Crack is just that good.
So
I just don't have the wallet to pay for Purple Crack. That's my problem.
Oh yeah, believe me. Hopefully I haven't said this on the podcast before. The last year I went to nationals in the D Stock Integra with Hoosiers. I took 14 Hoosiers with me, and I said it doesn't matter if I win or not. I'm leaving because this is ridiculous. At a pro, I'd burn through 2 Hoosiers in the front. So on Sunday, I'd always want to have 2 more. Fresh, because I made it to the challenge. They were best for the first 6 to 12 runs. So that was the point. It didn't matter. I could have probably found a way to keep that habit up, but I was always winning 2 tires, which wasn't much. If you won the challenge, you got like 4, but that didn't happen very often.
Yeah, very tough, right? Very tough.
Oh, exactly. Tell us, whenever you went to the BFGs all around on the Corvette, did you change the setup, or did you leave the setup the same?
I think it's hard to kind of remember. That whole week was a huge jumble because so it started off as a gigantic low when I personally, to me, I couldn't even I thought I was like in a different like dimension from Daddy. I didn't know where I was gonna even find the time. So I do believe we did change some things. I did learn some new things about the Corvette during that week. So we did make some small changes. Rake plays, just like on the S2000, rake plays kind of a big deal on that car. So we messed with the rake a little bit. And I think we also made a shock change that made the car easier to drive with having BFGs all the way around on the car.
Okay, that's what I've heard. And that's where driving David Whitener's car, I'm like, oh, I really don't want to run these. I mean, I lobbied so hard to put my Bridgestones on that car for the finale. And I went out there first run, and it felt great. But he admitted, he goes, well, I don't run the same setup. And me not being much of a setup guy, I've left my Toyo setup pretty much the same for Bridgestones and Rival S's. I've won on Rival S's before, but I just don't like the feel on the Civic. I don't exactly know where it's at. Where yet on the GT3, I didn't complain about that as much. I mean, that car's so light in the nose, I complained about that, but it is what it is. So
right.
You changed maybe the rake and maybe some shock adjustment. Whenever you have gone, I think you've tried Bridgestone and BFGs on the S2000?
Correct. And
did you tweak things there at all?
No, things definitely have to be tweaked between the two. So luckily for me, the shock changes on the car are pretty minimal, just because I think the car is pretty well sorted. The biggest difference that I need to do between the cars is there's a difference of front to rear ratio of how much spring rate you need. With the BFG setup, I put the RE71s on, and I cannot throw the car around nearly as confidently with the RE71s on. The rear just comes out way too fast. So the easiest thing for me is to just disconnect the rear sway bar, and that seems to make the car easier to drive on the RE71s. And at least for me, and like I said, everybody has a different setup. But at least for me, and I've tried to tweak the RE71 as much as I can on my car, but from testing back and forth, with individual tweaking for each tire, it ends up being that the Rival S is faster.
That's interesting. That's what David Whitener swore by that as well. And yet, usually I was faster than the Bridgestones by quite a bit, but I wasn't tweaking setup once again. But also on my car, what's oddly enough, at Nationals, I guess, last year when I drove mine, I left the Rival S's on the rear because I always felt so planted. Well, that's the same thing we did with the Porsche GT3 this year. We put the Bridgestones up front, trying to hope that they could stick when it's cold. Did you ever try that on the S2000? Was that ever something you're like, hey, I'll try something up front versus rear?
No, there's certain cars that work, and actually that kind of worked on the Corvette last year. It was pretty quick running a mixed setup, but the way the S2000 is, since it runs the same contact patch all the way around, and it's a pretty balanced car, I just don't think the car needed it. I think there are some benefits that you could get from mixing tires, but I would say 95% of the time that whatever benefits you can get out of it, there's always something bad that happens. And in that case, for you, maybe, one tire grips a little faster in ambient conditions, so it's loose in the beginning and then it tightens up as the heat builds up. Or a lot of times for me, the one thing that you had to be aware of when we were mixing tires on the Corvette was the different spring rates of each tire. The RE71s are pretty stiff, so if you were mixing tires and you put a certain steering input in, you had to be aware of which tire was biting in and actually turning, and which one wasn't. If you did it too quick, you're kind of out of phase of the other tire, and what would happen is, so one tire would bite in, the other one would get shock loaded, and when you shock loaded, it would, you just lose traction instantly, and then, and in that case, it was in the Corvette, you would just lose the rear end really fast.
Oh, that's interesting yeah, especially, once again, more of a pure rear-wheel drive car. I get that that's even plays a much bigger role. I felt like in the Civic, my whole reason for leaving Rival S's in the rear was I was second driver, and they were warm. I saw quite a few people spin. I said, it's not worth me spinning on my first run at Nationals. Just leave them back there. I'd done that before anyway. And I feel like the back of the Civic is just kind of hanging out anyway. Oh, and that's one thing. Driving David's car, I was so surprised it wasn't loose. But like you're saying, if it steps out easier in the Bridgestones on the Rival S, especially in the rear, it wasn't going to fly around as much. So it was very almost forgiving, but yet the front, whatever he did spring rate-wise, camber-wise, it was very responsive. It wasn't my complaining of, like, I don't know where it's at. It just happened to work.
So here, I because of my success with the Rival S's this year, I get a lot of questions, and I think you touched upon the two biggest differences between this and the RE71. And one is that it's a more forgiving tire, I think. I think it's harder to nail an RE71 run because there's a lot of good feel, but as soon as you start exceeding the optimal slip angle of that car, it goes away pretty fast. Whereas on the Rival S, even when you exceed the maximum slip angle that you should be at, the car would still turn in a little bit more. I mean, you'd induce a lot more slip angle related drag from adding that input in there, but the car would still turn, whereas the RE71, once you exceeded it, you can crank the wheel 5 degrees more, 10 degrees more, but the car would just, keep going the direction that it was when you exceeded the slip angle. So that's one big difference. And then the other one is spring rates. The tires respond a little, again, the tires have their own inherent spring rates. The BFG is a little softer than the RE71 in terms of how to set up the car. So Widener probably had more spring rate in the front to kind of compensate for the soft the Rival S sidewall. And but he did all of that, and he got it dialed in. And then what you were probably experiencing was just again that kind of forgiveness that the Rival S has over the RE71. Me personally, the tires grip almost the same. I think the Rival S has just a little bit more grip, but the gigantic thing that the Rival S does better is it does again, this goes right back into the whole forgiveness thing, is it lets you blend inputs in more. So if you draw a friction circle, right, the RE71 looks more like a diamond than the Rival S does. The Rival S has more rounded curves between the points because you can brake and you can turn more than you can in the Rival S, which translates into way deeper trail braking, for instance, or getting on the gas a little earlier and not upsetting the car than compared to the Rival or compared to the RE71.
Had you told me that a year or two ago, I would have stuck with him. That's what I think I do. I think I'm very aggressive when it comes to braking late and trail braking, especially we've chatted. The GT3, I'm trying to do more of that to keep the nose planted, which I believe you said you wouldn't do. But we now have the Bridgestones up front, which you tried basically for nationals only. It's interesting that the whole year we were running the Rival S's up front, and maybe we should throw those back on for this next weekend just to see if we notice a difference.
Okay.
I appreciate the input from the S2000 side as well as what you've figured out and what you think works and doesn't work. I think people, as you said, they've been asking you questions, so hopefully some people will pick this up here as well. What other S2000s and other have you driven? Like I think it was BSP when you drove Robert Thorne's car, or what other formats or what other classes have you driven?
That was I do remember that. I did drive BSP once. Yes, the Big Bad Wolf, as Robert likes to call it. I had the chance to drive that at Texas Prosolo, which unfortunately we ended up breaking an axle some part of Saturday afternoon. But so I did have the opportunity to drive that car once. That was fun. It was just weird to drive around on those gigantic Hoosiers, just a different feel. And I was having a hard time getting used to it's weird when you have that much grip. And you think you know that the car has all this grip, and then you go and you punt the car around. The car responds terribly. It's what I learned from that was that when you transition from street tires back to Hoosiers, is that the ultimate grip is there, but your transitional grip doesn't go up nearly the same amount as ultimate grip does. So you can't throw the car around as much as you think you can, if that makes any sense.
No, that's interesting. I know that I keep overdriving this last weekend in a really tight turnaround, the GT3. I just kept assuming, I'm like, it can do it so much faster than my civic brain thinks it can normally do it. I just overcooked it over and over. I think that's basically what you're saying there. It's just there's not some magical 50% more grip, even though the tires are twice as wide.
Yes, Oh yeah, oh yeah, and I mean, the weird conundrum of the whole ST Civic is always just, I mean, because the car's been fast ever since ST was formed, is that just your car is just so light, and you guys will always carry more speed through the turns than any of the other ST cars. I know I was talking to, I can't remember if it was Jeff or Nicole Wong, but they're trying to foray out of their CRX/Civic, and it was interesting just to kind of hear their feedback when they were driving. It's either their FRS or an ND Miata. That they can't, they can't go through the turns as fast. And yeah, it's just, that's just physics. With what is your ST Civic weigh, like 2,000 pounds, if that now?
Hey,
Correct.
buddy, let's not be talking high numbers like that. Mine, I think, is about 1935, and yet I think some of these Japanese are down in the 1900 range. And then the CRXs are even less.
Right, the CRX is even less. So yeah, I mean, it's just a pure physics thing. Yeah, you guys will always carry that speed, and then when you get in the GT3, there's no way that you're going to be able to carve that same speed through that turn. It's just, every time it opens up, that's where you gotta make up the difference in the GT3. That's what it's all about in that car.
That's so funny you say that, because I'm sitting there, and I even get John Ames in the car for the 5th run or 6th. We got a lot of runs this weekend. And I overcooked that turn again, like I got it right maybe once. I tried to recreate the turn at Nationals on the East course, the little pin turn, because I did it right once and then screwed it up twice. And I overcooked it. And I really thought, I've said this to so many people, there's nothing a Civic can do better than the GT3. It's so crazy the GT3 has an easier packs. But from what you're saying, that makes total sense. The weight of the car, and you look at the contact patch, in reality, it probably can carry more speed through that.
Oh yes. No, it can. And that's why the Civics dominated for as long as they have. I mean, remember the Civic was running both the STS and STX back then. It was, destroying all the Subarus outside of the Prosolos. And it's just a simple matter of physics and weight. So.
Oh yeah, and you mentioned Jeff and Nicole. Hey, maybe they'll come on the podcast and explain all this fun they're having with these cars, 3 different cars. And I'm so glad you said that also, because when I jumped in the STR S2000, I think I once again assumed, hey, this car is faster, it has more rubber, I'm going to go faster through all these turns. And I was not even kind of in my mind quick in the car at all. It's probably because I'm just making the bad assumption, which I happen to do in life every so often, and it's so nice to go, whoa, it was just the wrong assumption to begin with. So that's great to think that, hey, it may not do that better. It's thinking, hey, where I can use the power, it's going to be faster there. But not in every single place is it going to be faster.
Oh yeah, that was a very big lesson that I learned driving the Corvette. Just drive everything where grip mattered. You just have to drive it slower, and everywhere where you can actually accelerate, that's where you got to use the strengths of that car. So when I would drive the Corvette, I would have to change the mindset. And my mindset would be, whereas I can attack a slalom or I can attack an offset with the S2000, for me it was just get through the elements with the Corvette as neatly and as cleanly as you could, just because it's so wide, right? And as soon as you're done with the element, there's these little squirts that you have between elements, right? And that's where you needed to maximize. And that was the whole game plan when I drove that Corvette, was get through the elements and then use the power of the Corvette to just kind of shrink the course, if you will, between elements.
That is great insight. I hope people are going, wow, that's an epiphany here for me, it's so crazy. I've been trying to drive the Porsche just like the Civic, but thinking it's faster everywhere once again. And the next time I get in a Corvette, I'll have to remember that, hey, it's going to be faster here, but maybe not in this tight slalom. That's where a Civic probably does do better once again than most of these other heavier cars.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, the Civic has some great traits, but that's one of the reasons I'm really hesitant. Wong even jokingly said, "Hey, you should go drive our CRX," and actually declined because, like I said, it's a different platform that I don't know that I want to kind of get comfortable with, because I'm good in my SCR S2000 with the mindset of how to go through a course, what speed I can kind of go through things, with the weight of my car and the contact patch that I have. And pretty much everything I want to kind of drive at this point is heavier, or or at least makes more power. So
going backwards might confuse you. And that's two things I just thought of. Eric Strelnick had mentioned in the SSM car, he wanted to point and shoot. That reminds me of what you just said, that you wanted to get through elements and then shoot where you can use the power, get to the next section as quick as you can. I think he's saying the same thing you just said in those terms of, hey, I got to get through these sections and just squirt as quick as I can to the next section. And then what you said about the weight, I hope I didn't just say this, but I've been thinking it the whole time. I got in that S2000 STR form. I drove it a few times before I bought it, and I just felt like it was heavy. It was so bizarre to me that it felt heavy. I'm like, this just feels like a heavy Civic, that I can't go faster. I was once again trying to drive faster everywhere, not even trying to think that, hey, I can use the power here, here, and here, but not necessarily some turn.
Oh, yeah. Outside of the CR, a typical AP2 S2000 is somewhere in the 2,700 pound, maybe like mid to high 2,600 pound range. So that means compared to a CRX, you're carrying 800 more pounds. I mean, percentage-wise, that's what is that? It's like a third more, a quarter more.
Yep, you're right.
That's huge.
Yeah,
absolutely huge.
And that's where I try to explain to people. They go, "Oh, we can race a Civic, they'll race Corvettes and go-karts," and it just boggles some people's minds how fast a Civic is compared to a 500 horsepower Corvette with all that extra rubber. Because once again, the physics of the weight and the width of the cars pretty much defines how quick you're going to make it through the course.
Oh yeah, that's one of the weird things about autocross is because we don't have these long sections of acceleration, and width of the car is very important. That cars like your Civic or the CRX or Miatas do extremely well in our sport.
Yeah, have you ever driven a CSP Miata?
No, have not yet. Maybe one of these days I'll go bug Danny about driving Oscar. But no, not yet.
Those things look like, watching Scott Frazier, just looks like he's in a go-kart out there. Remember at El Toro years ago, just flying.
Oh, Scott, Billy Davis has been really fast on the East Coast. But man, one of the things I would have loved to have seen would be a great battle would have been Scott back in the old Kubo car against Billy. I think that would have been pretty epic. Not that Super Street wasn't epic, but I think that would be an awesome East versus West battle that unfortunately we won't see because the Kubo car is gone. But I still remember Scott driving that thing thinking, man, that guy's really fast. I mean, it still is. I still look up to Scott in his driving. I remember going into Nationals this year, and Ken Monichi's one of my really good friends, and that was a big question mark. Scott had very little time in that car. They just started developing it, but with the strengths of that car and Scott's awesome driving, that's you put those two things together, and it's pretty much an automatic national championship right there.
Yeah, and Scott told me. I don't think Scott realized how much Ken or how long he'd been driving that car. I think it's something like 6 years. And Scott was like, oh, wow. And he goes, well, I used to drive Porsches a whole bunch in the past. And both those guys seem to say it does take some time to figure out what the heck's going on with those cars as well as setup. Like you mentioned rake. Maybe you told us about the car, but Ken definitely said the rake on that GT3 doesn't quite look right. So I think Scott knew what to do somewhat setup-wise. And then obviously he's just skillful.
Oh yeah, I mean, Scott is awesome with alignments. It's kind of what he does for work, corner balancing and whatnot. So he's seen a lot. He's seen what works. He's seen what doesn't. So I'm sure he has a lot of knowledge in that area. So I'm still learning. I'm still learning a lot of stuff. As much as I've been in autocross, it's crazy. There's a lot of theory out there. Unfortunately, a lot of the theory just doesn't apply to what we do a lot of the times. So in that aspect, you got to do two things. You have to learn from people that have actually experienced it, right? And then make mental notes. And then you just have to test. And you have to test for yourself. I mean, a lot of people assumed that the only thing I drove was Rival S all year, but that's actually false. I actually started on the RE71, and then went to the Rival, and then I tested both. I even tested both at Nationals just to know where I was at between the two tires. And then not only that, again, testing is huge, and especially on the national stage. So I, on purpose, since we were driving Thursday, Friday, kind of at the end, meaning that there was most likely going to be a lot of OPR, I scheduled for Wednesday evening in the test and tune, which by then, I mean, it's been running all week long. It was going to be the most rubbered in, and I needed to know, if it was going to affect the tires, if it was going to affect Rival S versus RE71 differently. And lucky for me, it ended up not. The Rival, I actually put my fastest time down on the test and tune with all that OPR on there. So that erased any concern and any doubt. Still never beat Brian Karwan, though. I call Brian Karwan the king of STR test and tune. He's the national STR test and tune winner. Never was able to match his time. But again, back to the whole, testing. It's crucial. A lot of people get lazy, or they just hear a setup that somebody does, and then they just kind of throw it on their car and hope it works. But it doesn't, because like you had mentioned earlier, there's all these different driving styles, and then there's all these different platforms, and with that, you gotta get the setup that works for you. I just recently at this last event had Ryan Beecher, another driver that I regard very highly and admire. And I rode with him, and I had him drive my car, and the differences were very different. And I was able to pick up some things, with Ryan, and the thing is to learn. You have to open your mind and not think, okay, well, my driving style is good, and I don't want to learn anymore. And you do that, and one day somebody will come in your class, and you'll get your butt kicked. It's just like kung fu. I relate a lot of things to that. It's like different styles of kung fu. If you think that you're awesome in monkey style, and you don't bother to learn the other styles and what the strengths and weaknesses of everything are, then sure enough, one day, probably sooner than later, you're going to get your butt kicked. So to learn. You learn from everybody else. Learn from, and I'm really lucky to have Brian Peters, always show up to the SoCal events. Brian gives me tough love, which I love. I have him ride in the car with me, and he just, I always get this shaking of the head, when we're done. Peters looks at me and goes, "I don't know how you go as fast as you do." But, and then I've had Brian Highcutter drive my car before. So, again, another thing that I kind of am getting at now is that even if you've been doing this for years and, you've been driving the same car for years, sometimes you really need somebody else's perspective on either your driving or the car setup to expand. Otherwise, you're just going to keep being stuck in that same hole that you've been in for the last couple of years. So if you have the opportunity to have some fast people, definitely put them in your car, have them ride with you, have them drive it. That's huge, I think. It's really strange. I've seen some really good drivers just drive really badly set up cars, but they're so good at driving that they drive around a badly set up car. And then when you put them in something fast, I mean, their times drop drastically. So,
yeah, that's where maybe it would help me and people like me that don't think they have a lot of feel. I don't usually come back from driving a car and say, oh, it pushes, or it pushes mid-turn. It's like, what are you talking about? I just know I'm at the limit of what it's going to do grip-wise, and I drive that. Do you think it'd be helpful getting the people in the car, which I've done probably not often enough, but riding with them to see what they do differently, and will that help somebody pick up the feel?
No, well, absolutely, it will. Again, it's the whole kung fu thing. Their kung fu may be totally different in that car, and then because of that, you'll notice the deficiencies of maybe not just your car that you need to fix, that you've been driving around, but also your driving. Like the one thing that I learned having Bjoin in the car last weekend was that I'm just a hair too slow on the brakes in every turn. So I just overcook it by maybe 3 feet, But I've been able to always get around that problem because, I'll put the input fast enough and maybe the tail will just step out just a smidge, but I correct fast enough for it that, it doesn't really, you can't physically actually see it move. But, that maybe cost me 100th here and 100th there. But, every 100th adds up when you're, tossing the wheel 30, 40 times on an autocross. So.
Yeah, do you run data ever? Do you look at video? What's your kind of learning strategy?
I really wish I could run data, and I hope to start venturing into that more. A lot of times I've been doing a lot of co-driving the last 6-7 years. Been very lucky to have some great co-drive opportunities. But unfortunately, data takes a lot of time to analyze. So unless you have somebody that's pretty used to doing that, I've tried it a little bit so far. I'm just not quite used to doing it really fast. At this point, data is a lot more useful maybe like after the event, to see, okay, where is that guy faster than me here? Me, at this point of where I am, I need useful information right after that first run. So one thing that you'll see me do, and I hope none of my competitors ever get offended that I disappear, but especially at a big event like Nationals, what I'll do with video is as soon as I come back from the run, I'm trying not to worry about cooling down the tires or the car or anything. The first thing I try to do is I try to close my eyes, remember the mistakes that I made, and then I pull the camera out. Nationals is really hot, so I had my rental pretty close by. But jump into the rental, load up the video, and then there's nothing like having the run fresh in your mind to know where you made the mistake, and then in the video, it all becomes clear where you made the mistake. And a lot of people may not see the mistakes because they may be minute mistakes, but because the run is really fresh in your mind, to me, that's the huge benefit for video for me. So once I can get myself up to speed in doing that with data as well, I'd like to. But data, I think, benefits more when you have a co-driver that's faster than you, that you can compare, okay, well, where was this guy faster than me here? And I haven't had a steady co-driver this year, so it hasn't been as meaningful. But I do want to get to that point.
For your video, do you see your hands in your video, or are you just seeing where the car is at?
Absolutely have to have your the steering wheel at least, or the hands in the video. To me, I see video of the camera on top of the car or on the front nose, and it's very meaningless because you have no idea what's going on with the car. You don't know how much the wheel's turned. You don't know if it's understeering or oversteering, and like I said, it's trying to get all the nuances of the small mistakes that you've made. That's how you're going to go fast. People that are really fast, you ever watch like Highcotter's or Brian Peters' video, and once in a while you'll see the car step out, right? But they're so quick with their hands to catch it that the car actually never changes direction or momentum or anything like that. But when you see it in the car, okay, there's something there that's either upsetting the car, or there's a bump, or there's something there. So, you know, and I see that too in my videos. So what I do is, if that's happening, you know, I don't want the car to oversteer, so I may slow down a touch, or I may just choose a slightly different way of negotiating that section so that doesn't happen again.
Yeah, good inputs, and I have watched their videos, and you're right. They're sensing as quickly as possible that the rear is stepping out. For you guys in rear-wheel drive, are you lifting at all then, or is the steering wheel movement enough to catch that? Like maybe you said that the momentum stays pretty much the same.
So to me, it's just second nature how I catch a car. But from what I can tell you, it's just how quickly and how much input you put into catching the car to catch the oversteer. I usually don't change throttle. So one big thing that I've learned in autocross is weight transfer, and any kind of big changes in throttle will drastically change weight transfer, and it usually changes when the tail steps out. It usually changes weight transfer for the worse. When you keep whatever throttle you applied, weight transfer doesn't happen. All you're doing is correcting the oversteer, so the car still stays pretty stable, even though that the car is oversteering. I've seen people lift, and when you're oversteering, it's game over most of the time, because as soon as you do that, the weight transfers to the front, the rear end gets loose, and then it's Spin City. And then I've seen people add more throttle, which isn't as bad as lifting, but now you're just making the traction in the back even worse. I mean, the car's not going anywhere, but now you're just adding a ton more slip angle. So the car, it'll eventually come back, the tail will come back, but it'll take a little bit longer doing that because you've just added more RPMs than what the car is actually traveling at.
Yeah, no, thanks for the input there. So if anything, you're keeping constant throttle or maybe adding a little bit, but mostly it's just the hand. Like you're saying, how quickly and how much you're inputting with the steering wheel to catch.
Yes, it's and again, this is where seat time comes in. This is where you have to figure out how fast you need to move your hands and how much you need to move your hands based on how much the car is stepping out on you, and that only takes practice. There's no formula I can tell you. That is purely just seat time on how to develop that skill.
The formula that I've found is when I get from the Civic and I jump in an S2000, the steering rack is so quick that it takes me several turns before I calm down and don't jerk that wheel.
Yes, which is one of the things I love about the S2000. Every time I get out of that car into something else, a lot of times I just feel like, driving the Corvette, I felt like I was driving a Mack truck because the wheel is just gigantic, and then it requires so much more steering than the S2000 does. So that was kind of a rude awakening when I jumped into the Z06.
Yeah, so... Oh, sorry, I got distracted. So you were in the stock Corvette with the bigger wheel. Do you shuffle steer, or do you just hold the wheel in the S2000 and just turn?
So one awesome thing that you learn from some of the top drivers, and again, I keep coming back to Brian Peters, and I'd like to give a big shout out to Brian Peters. Brian's such an awesome guy because, he's helping his primary co-driver, John Hogan, all the time. A ton of people want him to ride with you or drive their cars, and he's really receptive to helping people out, and I think he's one of the premier Evo instructors, and that's probably why. Just he's a super patient and just very nice like that. But one of the simplest things that Brian told me was, "Hey, you need to get closer to that wheel," and I never really understood why until I actually did it. And when you get closer to the wheel, you get much better leverage on it. And it's not really leverage that you may not need all that strength to turn the wheel, but you use less of your core strength, I want to say, to turn the wheel, which means you have that much more feel left over to know what the car and the wheel is doing. that makes any sense.
Oh, it makes a ton of sense. And I started doing that after I had David Faltham, my Integra, way back in the day, since he used to race one as well and won several championships. I felt like he was like, could eat off the steering wheel. He was sitting so close and leaning forward. And I kind of feel like watching the videos of Brian Peters from Nationals, he's up there. I mean, he, just like he told you, he's up close to that wheel.
No, he gets up close. So I do the same thing. I get a lot closer, and because of that, more so with the S2000, I don't think you'll ever see a video of me ever having to even take a hand off the wheel. It's always at 3 and 9. Certain cars do require more, and when that happens, though, I've been very good about leaving one of the hands on the wheel and just using the other one just to kind of assist a little bit more. Because, again, you always want to feel what that front end is doing. And to me, when I'm shuffle steering, I lose that because I don't know how much input is in there anymore.
Good point.
And that's the thing. Now, is it bad? I know you're going to get to the whole left foot braking versus right foot braking thing. It kind of goes to that too. You know, the amazing thing about Highcotter is I watch him drive and he shuffle steers, and I'm like, oh wow. You know, it's like, you know, that's so. Is it terrible to do? No, but you know, if you're a beginner or an intermediate driver, I would say that I would lean away from shuffle steering just because it gives you less feedback at what the wheel is doing, especially when you're driving a car that is tail happy, and when you have to start shuffling the wheel around to try to catch it. Sometimes you're going to catch the wheel at the wrong place.
It's going to hurt.
And yeah, it's going to hurt. You're going to go for a spin because you didn't quite know how much steering you put in it. So.
No, those were good insights. And every time I ride with somebody, lately Salil, I'm like, wow, I should try that. Like, you're able to make all these turns by turning. I'm just kind of amazed. I'm like, it's so ingrained in me not to do that. Somebody asked a while back. I'm like, I honestly don't know what I do. I said, I used to shuffle steer, and what that means is I've never stopped.
Yeah, and that's one of the harder things about when you become an experienced driver is you get ingrained in not ingrained, but you're so used to doing it one way that it's you know, it's like the whole adage of it's trying to, you know, teach an old dog new tricks. It gets hard. The one thing that that Brian Peters beats into my head that I'm terrible with, Brian and Doug Rowse when they ride with me, is I am like the world's worst person at looking ahead on a course. I just, you know, and part of that just comes from, I grew up on simulators. Not so much driving like Gran Turismo, but I remember, you know, I used to put like flight simulators and stuff on my computer, and yeah, you know, you should be looking all around, but all you have is that tiny little like 15-inch screen in front, so that's your whole world there. And I guess I've just gotten so used to that and having to know what is around you memory-wise that I just don't look ahead. And then, you know, that got even worse when, you know, you started playing Gran Turismo or, you know, other racing games. So I'm terrible at looking ahead. One thing I've actually started doing right after Nationals is I have this, so to compensate for my terrible lack of looking ahead, I walk the course a lot because I memorize sections. And I definitely do not preach to people that that's what you should do. But that's my crutch. And I get around that crutch of not looking ahead by memorizing. It's not the best way to do it, absolutely. So I'm starting to teach myself to look ahead. The problem, again, I'm becoming an older dog, is that so this last event, I walked once, and I started driving. And at the very first run, I am looking ahead like a champ. You know, Doug Rowse, Brian Peters, they'd be proud. And then by run 2 and 3, I already know what's coming up ahead, so I already know what the braking zone is. And now I'm starting to not look ahead. And it's just, you know, it's being part lazy, but it's just me going back to what I'm used to. I'm used to focusing on the braking zone because I know where I should brake, and so that's definitely one thing that I need to fix. Like as lucky as I am to have 3 championships, if I want to keep adding more like some of these other guys, I'm gonna have to improve and evolve as a driver, and hopefully this next year that'll be my focus to try to look ahead more to kind of gauge what I should do better, as the turns approach.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'd love to point a camera at you to see how much you are not looking ahead. I wrote down the questions. Does he walk and memorize it? You have to if you're not looking ahead. But what's great is, let's say there's other people that just don't look ahead. You just gave them the key to how you won those championships and how you are fast. You know what's coming up even without looking to see it. You know what you have to do to get to the next element. I'm wondering if you look like partially like one section ahead or one cone, whereas I think some people that are new don't know to look ahead at all. So I think there's a big scale here of, yes, compared to Brian Peters or somebody who's looking all the way across in the 180, maybe you just kind of know what the 180 is. You've raced so much, you're like, oh, it's going to be about this speed, got my brake zone right.
No, that's exactly what it is. I mentally mapped. I have a pretty good sense of shapes, maps, orientation. So I map what in my brain. I map out how much of a turn this is going to be. Before when I walk and before I get to that part. So with that, I negotiate the course and I'm able to do it quickly. But again, probably not the best. One of the things it does make me do that, again, it's one of the things that I'm trying to not do, is I'm very choppy with the throttle. I should be much smoother. But when you're not 100% sure what's coming up ahead because you're not looking ahead, you just, you tend to be more digital with the throttle. So, again, always evolving, always evolving.
No, that's great to... The insight, once again, is so huge to know, hey, I can get better at this. I've got other people riding with me. In this case, you got Doug and Brian in the car telling you what to do. I think that's huge for everybody. I think even beginners or people who have been doing this a long time and kind of feel stuck. If they're not doing that, try something new. It's an experiment. Get somebody else in there. Get somebody to ride with you. Get someone to point. What I do with people that are new or somebody not looking ahead, my hand kind of gets in front of their face when we're going left and says, look over there. Because it's night and day when you can tell when somebody's helmet doesn't turn. You're like, whoa, this is a 180. How do you know where you're going? I wonder, as part of this, so I will go to events, even nationals, sometimes I'll walk twice. And I kind of have the same thing you mentioned, how the first time I may look ahead, I am sometimes fastest, especially locally, not even walking a course. And it's bizarro to me that I can't stay focused enough that to keep looking ahead so I can keep getting faster. So I wonder if you should challenge yourself, although you still have to just look ahead. Don't walk the course. When I don't...
At all.
Yeah. When I don't know the course, I'm scared. And guess what? I look ahead. I look way ahead. Because I'm like, what's really coming up? And I think I even like the adrenaline I get when I go up to the start line and I'm like, do I really know where the heck I'm going? And a lot of times it's like, well, I know kind of where the course is at. But I'll tell you, maybe something to experiment with. I think you and I both still want to look ahead all the time. But there's something about knowing the courses. Going, I kind of know where I'm going. And I wonder if that's part of the problem with these pro solos, where sometimes we don't improve like we are always expecting to on the last runs.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. You get into a funk, or maybe this set rhythm that you fall back on because you're not looking ahead anymore, and you're not improving because of that. Absolutely.
So tell us about the first pro solo. Like, when did you get into pro solo racing? That is an addiction of ours.
Yeah, so that was a really interesting story. So going back to me being really poor, we had just run on street tires all the time, and I ran across an opportunity. I was still in Chicago, of an open seat available here in SoCal for a co-drive. And back then, the San Diego Qualcomm Stadium is a bit rougher than it used to be. 12, 15 years ago, it was a primo site, great place. the problem with the Chicago region, probably kind of like Denver probably is that the season is pretty short. You know, it really just goes from May until October, and then you have this really long off season. So these events were happening while we were still in our off season. I think it was like February or something. I was itching to try something different, so you know, I contacted the guy and had very, very minimal Hoosier experience at this point. So, and this was like a brand new generation of Hoosiers that had just come out. So I just said, hey, let's just give it a shot. So bought a ticket, flew out to LA, did the tour, and actually took second place. And I was like, hey, you know, that's not bad for, you know, and then the car, you know, it was on stock shocks. It was pretty heavy. It was kind of more set up for track use. But you know, I was happy with that. And then the next week, we weren't running at Toro at this point. They had, I think it was like San Bernardino Airport. I can't remember where it was exactly because we haven't run there since I've moved to LA. But there was a Pro Solo the week after. And I was clueless. I had no idea. I knew the concept of a Pro Solo in that there was a drag racing tree and 2 mirrored courses, but I didn't really know much else. So I was just asking random people how to do it. And fortunately for me, the course blended well with my driving. And the very first Pro Solo that I had actually done, I had won. So that's what hooked me on Pro Solo. So, you know, hey, I'm not bad at this drag tree and mirrored courses stuff. So that's how I did my Pro Solo, and I've been hooked ever since. Love the finale. I don't think, other than 1 year, which I took a year off, and I think I just flew in to drive somebody's car just for giggles. Other than that, pretty much every year I've come to nationals, I've also done the Pro Solo and the finale.
Yeah, this year I got in as a third tier, had no points, but I just couldn't not do it, even though I did 2 different cars. I was like, how could I miss the finale? This seems so odd that I would dare miss this.
It feels weird that you're not in the Pro Solo finale. I mean, it would have, right, if you didn't get in, right?
Oh, yeah, it would have been. I probably would have had a little tear, like I didn't make it. I mean, it's just... And it's if nothing else, since I don't do a lot of the test and tune stuff there, it's, especially if you're driving the same car, you're going to get used to, in our case, the altitude, that there's not much. So your car is so much faster. As you said, the bad habit of using the gas pedal as an on-off switch, at this altitude, you can do that, and you don't realize because it's not doing much. You get down to Lincoln, I'm like, several times I'm like, what is wrong? I'm like, oh, it's my foot. I'm not just doing percentages. I'm doing 100% or 50%.
Exactly.
So left foot, right foot braking. What are you doing?
Oh, always right foot. I did experiment. I guess all kids do. I did experiment with left foot braking because, again, a very good friend and super fast driver, Ken Onishi, is he's probably the best left foot braker I've ever ridden with. You know, I would ride with Ken, and, you know, it's really weird. Ken would get the car in these states that I knew we were just going to spin. I'm like, all right, we're done. And then he does something with he does some weird weight transfer thing with the left foot where, you know, something's going on. And I still don't know. Until this day, I still don't know how he does it. But, like, the car, you know, it doesn't spin. You know, it doesn't do anything awkward. It just kind of stays on the path that it should. So that was kind of my impetus to try. But, you know what, for me, maybe it's just because I tend to drive a little harder or overdrive things a little bit more than other people. It just didn't work. And not to say that it doesn't. Plenty of right foot fast breakers, plenty of left. The crutch I think that I see all the time with left foot breakers is they just left foot brake too much. You know, I see constant brake lights when it shouldn't. And Ken is, like I said, fastest left foot breaker I know. And the reason being is you don't see him break as much as other left foot breakers do. You know, he doesn't use the left foot as a crutch to fix mistakes like I see a lot of other left foot breakers do. One of the big things that I see as an advantage is just, you know, there's that lag time between throttle to brake as a right foot breaker, which I wish I could eliminate, but unfortunately, you know, I can't adapt well to left foot brake. Whereas a left foot breaker, you know, you're on the gas and you can jam on the brakes right as you're getting off, and you can, you know, you can ride. That means you can stay on that gas just like a tenth of a second more than I can. But again, you know, on a nationals course, you know, every time that he can stay on the gas a tenth of a second more, you know, he's going to be just a touch faster here and there. So luckily for me, it's worked out to be a right foot breaker. Maybe I might try left foot braking again, but I also tend to kind of stay away from turbo platforms for that same reason. I'm not, like I said, I'm not that smooth with the throttle as much as I'd like to be. I think left foot braking is a gigantic help for those kind of cars that are turbocharged. But me, in the platforms that I've been driving, right foot braking has been the way to go.
Oh, I totally agree with your thoughts there, too. Is in turbo cars, if you get away with it, that's why I learned it. It's huge. Do you think you actually lift, like a hard lift, to ever make the S2000 pivot at all, or no?
Oh, no, all the time. All the time, just to get the rotation going, for sure. There's a lot of that going on. So, and you know, that's probably where I get myself into a lot of trouble with left foot braking, is corners that I'd probably, you know, would just require a lift. I'd probably start braking with the left foot, and I'd probably just scrub too much speed off. You know, there's a lot of times where, you know, you're coming into a turn and you kind of lift, and you don't know if you lifted enough, right? But you just kind of lift and go, all right, you better stick. And then it does stick. And then you kind of learn, oh, okay, she can make it through with just, you know, a half a lift or a, you know, a full lift here. Whereas, you know, when I tried left foot braking, no, I would, as soon as I lifted, for some reason, I couldn't correlate just lifting without braking.
Yeah, that's what I still want to add to the tool belt. For sure, it's like something that just isn't easy, but yeah, I think that'd be the ultimate. If I knew in my toolkit, I would do that, to have all three: left foot braking, just right foot braking, and lifting.
Well, to give you an interesting perspective, so Ken Monishi, Gary Thomason, they both, Gary, you know, has way more jackets than I do. They both worked at AMSA, which is a car testing company. And, you know, Ken told me a very interesting fact about Gary. I hope it's okay to share. I don't think it's a big deal. But, so, you know, they do a lot of testing with just regular cars, you know, like a Prius or vans or trucks or whatever. But, you know, they're trying to still maximize, you know, the performance out of the car. And he told me something really interesting about Gary. And this is what it kind of helped me still stay as a right foot breaker, is that he told me that Gary actually, when he tests, Gary left foot brakes. But when Gary races, he right foot brakes. So Gary has both of those things in his toolbox, but Gary chooses to right foot brake. So if someone as fast as Gary can decide that right foot braking is better, then yeah, I think I'm okay with right foot braking.
Especially because he has the opportunity to really practice the left foot braking. And that's why I tell you, if you're going to try it, I don't know how long you have to commit to it before it actually is something where you're, once again, can even do what you do with your right foot, where you know the thresholds.
Right. No, I think I think initially you'd probably be slower for a while, you know, just until you finally kind of get that correct balance of, you know, of how to do it correctly. And then you may actually get back to how fast you were. But then now it's a question of, can you go a little bit faster than were you right foot braking? So, definitely something that might be useful. But again, I think some platforms benefit way more than others, and the ones that I'm shooting for that I like typically don't need left foot braking.
Exactly. So why even play with it? That's good thoughts for everybody out there. So many platforms, there's no huge benefit to the learning curve you're going to have to take to get there, to get competitive again.
Right.
So do you do anything special thought-wise? You're walking the course, you're memorizing it, certain ways you attack sweepers or slaloms in the S2000?
So the biggest thing that I used to do wrong all the time that I would lose out, and I learned this, and it hasn't been that long that I've learned this, is that cutting distance in sweepers is key. Yeah, you might be able to stay out and then take a more classic racing line, and it may help you. But again, when you're doing this in 3 runs, there's more margin for error doing that. And then, when people are riding that line and start putting, crud on that line that you wanted to take, then it's, then the line is done, right? So I learned that play on my strengths, which my strengths are usually like fast transitions and stuff like that, where I can move the car left to right really fast. That's my strength. I'd say sweepers are kind of a weakness for me, but the thing that I've improved is if you take the tight line through sweepers most of the time, number one, you're cutting distance, and number two, you're always playing it safe so that you're not putting yourself into a position where you're going to push way out from cooking going into that too fast. Because once I started taking the tight line through things, it was much safer going through it that way, because I when you're trying to take that classic line, sometimes you just push way out, way farther than you should. And when you try to take it tight and you end up pushing just a little bit, you're not too far off the line. But when you're trying to take that classic line in and you're trying to, stay out, and then you cook it going out, then you're way out at that point, and then that run is toast. So in that sense, definitely I just take the tight line through sweepers and anything that you're just kind of staying in the turn for a long time.
So you'd rather think about pinching something possibly. I'm trying to think back on the Nationals, the West course. You had that finish. You had the big kind of sweeper around to the really fast finish. You were probably just trying to hold the inside line as much as possible.
Right. So. For those that were at Nationals, the fastest run for me was right as soon as you dump into that first part of the finish, first part of the element there. Instead of setting out a little bit to the right and then coming back to the left, I immediately just started kind of not a straight line kinch, but more. It was still a bit of an arc, but it was an arc. Definitely, quicker towards that cone, if that makes any sense.
Oh yeah, just cutting the distance as much as possible.
Yeah, so it's cutting the distance, and then that would have me kind of back off just a touch when I got to that cone, versus maybe if I had taken the wider line, I could have been foot to the floor all the way through. But cutting the distance just a little bit and having to lift just a little bit more, I think in the end would have been faster through that section anyway. And then again, I was running 4th heat on Thursday, Friday. So if there's, any kind of crap in the outside racing line, you would have been done.
That's the other thing, is it's so risky. If you misgauge and you slide out very far, you're in the crud, and then your tires are even gooped up for the next run. And
oh yeah, not just goofed up, man. As soon as you start getting into that, and again with 3 runs, that it just becomes an unrecoverable mistake once you get far enough into that where you can't recover.
Yeah, it's the risk that not worth taking. Several people have said on the podcast, the first run they might do it 95 or 96% and be trying to take that tight line. Just reduce the risk in the risky areas as much as possible.
Yeah.
At a national format with 3 runs only.
And that's the one thing I did learn in the last 10 years is actually not even the last 10 years, in the last 3 years, is that you have to have a different mentality for nationals. When you do three runs, per day, your mentality has to be different. I mean, I used to need 6 runs, like 10 years ago, and then even nationals like 5-6 years ago. So here's the thing, Kench, like in the last 6 years of me going to nationals, 3 of them I was able to win. The other three I've all had runs where it was faster, but I coned it. And if you saw, like, for instance, the Borowskis are really good friends of mine, Hubert and Borowski, and apparently, I think this was back in 2012, I hit a cone going straight. I hit a cone where I was setting up for a turn, so the car wasn't really doing anything. I was just, it was kind of a little squirt of acceleration into a braking area, and somewhere where I was braking, the car wasn't even turning. I clipped the cone on the outside, just trying to set up, that much for it, and that was stupid. And then I thought, you know what? Why are you taking, such a risk to try to maximize the time? You got to be a little bit more considerate to, maybe reducing the factor of hitting those, the cones, the risk of it, to get at least a good first or second run in there. So that's one thing you definitely have to master when you come to the national stage.
That's interesting that you hit it trying to set up instead of just trying to get a little bit extra just for probably some line choice, which comes back to my thought of that last turn at nationals that you were tighter in there. I do wonder, did I go out further out there, which is usually a cardinal sin in my mind, just to make it easier to get to the finish? As John Ames always said, more distance for more speed is something you should never do. Like, don't add the distance just so you can go slightly faster somewhere. I mean, setup's important at times, but it sounds like you are really dialing it back to where you're not going to add that distance. At least you're not going to plan to add much distance.
No, yeah. 5-6 years ago, I would have been not so smart, and I would have added that distance. And now, again, 3-run game, you have to understand the risks of what you do too, and the risk to reward, it's just not there. So, somebody might have taken that outside line, and they might have maybe gained a 10th on me on that one turn, but to try to get that done in 3 runs and go faster everywhere else, and then beat me by a 10th there, not likely to happen.
Yeah, and another interesting thing is just like a pro solo, is you're going faster and faster, which makes it riskier and riskier in the next element you come up to, from braking zone to just hitting a cone. So you told us you struggle with looking ahead. What do you think you're best at?
What am I best at? That's a good question. I don't know that I would say, and again, this goes back to just like walking the course. Some people may only do it 2-3 times. At nationals, I walked the course about 10 times. Not only did I walk the course 10 times, but obviously being a Thursday, Friday driver, there's availability of people putting their videos up on YouTube. I must have watched videos like 100 times, to the point where, I could probably close my eyes without ever driving the course and just completely replay the course. And the benefit to doing that, I wouldn't say benefit, but it can be at times, is that one of the interesting things that I can do is I can throw down a really fast time on my first run. And, because a lot of people, like you said, they're driving 95% on that first run to be more cautious, right? As long as I'm pretty familiar with the car, I can go out there and I can throw down a fast time pretty quickly. I may have a little bit of an error here or there, and that's what gets me. That's what happened here at Nationals first day is first one was fast, but I clipped a cone that I didn't think I was going to clip. So that's, I guess, what I would say that I'm good at is the memorization thing that I told you I do. allows me to kind of map out what the course looks like before I get there, so that I can take that turn pretty close to 100% on that first run.
And put that pressure on other people as well.
As long as I can keep it clean, I can put the pressure on. Unfortunately, this year, I gotta say, and no disrespect to my STR competitors, but this year, at least compared to last year, I don't think I drove quite the way I wanted to. In terms of like what I expected of myself, I just didn't think I was quite there the way it was last year. And again, it's part of it was just execution, Kinch. The first run on day one, it was fast, and I coned it. Totally not on the game plan. We come to run two, then so you've already lost one run. Now you got to put a clean one in. So I did, but I ended up over-slowing where I hit the cone, and then I ended up pushing too hard in two places. One was with that finish that we were just talking about on the West course. Pushed too hard there and had to way back off. And so I got a clean run, but it was a second slower than the first run that I put down. So, some fast SCR people had already thrown down good times. Here I am, dirty with a fast run, first run, and then way too slow on the second run. So I've totally backed myself into the corner, which I promised myself I would not do. And there I was again. Luckily, for some good reason this year, I've been able to be kind of clutch in a lot of bad situations I keep putting myself into like this. And I was able to kind of dig deep and pull out a fast run. Probably could have been faster if I didn't back myself into the corner that I did. But for the given situation, I would say that I was really happy to, pull it out of my ass, so to speak, and to throw it on a good time that gave me the lead going into day two.
Yeah, you're like so happy that you're like, whoa, it worked. Didn't go according to the game plan, but sounds like a couple times this year that happened and you pulled it out.
Yes, but it's totally not like I said, nationals with 3 runs, you have to have a game plan. It totally did not go, the way that I wanted, that I had, made the game plan. So lucked out, I guess, a little bit in that sense. But yeah.
So have you been doing much official teaching at different events, or maybe just teaching when you're at these Saturday test and tunes? I've been helping certain people out at our Saturday practices and whatnot. Try to drive better, but not really in an official capacity. I try to instruct when I can. The one thing I kind of have shied away from is trying to instruct beginner drivers. The one thing all right, so the one thing that usually happens, and this is why I don't do it anymore, is, so, like I said, I tend to be like a 100%, or, I wouldn't even say 100%. I tend to be a 101% driver. And what I mean by 100% one is, so the car is, it's like drifting, Kinch. It's like, the car is under control, yet not in control, right? It's oversteering, so it's not really 100% in control, but you can still control the out of controlness, right? And in that sense, I kind of drive like that. I can make it work, but when a newbie sees the way I drive and then they replicate it, like really bad things happen. Either they spin or they plow like a million cones. So I've kind of shied away from kind of, if I do have somebody that's new, I just dial it way back to like 80%. I dial it so that, I can probably like play Pokemon while I drive the car, just so they can see the line. Otherwise, like I said, there's a couple people that I try to help, try to help them kind of turn up the aggression a little bit and what to do with the car to, get the car to its maximum. But no,
Nothing in an official capacity. I will say a really funny thing. I know you and Max are talking about Tom Berry, and so Tom Berry loves to ride as well as drive with people. And like I said, I always love getting input from other fast drivers, and Tom loves to ride with me. And it's because every time I take Tom for a ride, Tom just looks at me and goes, "How do you do that?" And he goes, if we were to run like a beginner school and teach them all these things of what not to do, like you do all these things that we teach people not to do, like break and turn at the same time, or at least it looks like it, right? And all these things, but he's like, you not only do these things and somehow keep the car under control, but you are really fast doing it. So I kind of took that kind of as a compliment. I guess it was a compliment. But again, just different styles of kung fu. Back to the whole kung fu thing. Just different styles of the way we do things. Tom has plenty of jackets, has a different way to drive, and I think that's why he likes to ride with me, because he sees something so different than the way he does it that he tries to glean what he can. I've heard like Matthew Braun kind of has a similar style. That I might, and he has plenty of jackets, and he makes it work. So we're always trying to learn from each other, and that's going to be your fastest person, unless you're an alien like Highcott or Peters. Then I don't know where you go faster from there, but
just they keep doing what they keep doing. I rode with Matthew Braun at Spring Nationals, and yes, it is very different. I also rode with Chris Mayfield, I guess twice now, only 2 runs, but he's close to that. And I thought I was like a late breaking, combining lots of things, and they just take it to like another level. So I imagine you're in that realm too. And talking with Tom, when I came out and bought Jeff and Nicole's Civic, he rode with me and then he drove the car. And then on the podcast interview, he goes, "Yeah, you and I try to put the nose of the car. We try to like put it on nose," which sounds kind of like what you're doing. So I'm surprised he thinks you're doing a lot of different things. He's saying the data over and over is proving that's not fast. But as we know, depending on how our car's set up and what we know, to try to change something if we're already pretty quick, I don't know if it's possible, or if it is, how much time would really take to change. Because we change one thing, that means you have to change something else to be faster somewhere else.
Correct. I agree. Riding with Brian Beecher, he was driving a Miata. I was in my S2000. The car, he was an NB Miata, and the inputs that he was making just didn't work on my car. With a couple more runs, with him being able to adapt to my car, basically it was just my car steers a lot faster than his does. He would have been faster, but again, different platforms require you to drive a little differently. And then can you make the adjustment fast enough to drive up to that car's potential? Maybe. Or maybe you just have to change the setup to suit your driving better,
Exactly, yeah. How will this car react to my inputs versus which inputs are really the fastest for that platform?
Exactly.
So that's interesting. You know what you're best at. You know what you struggle with. Co-driving. You co-drive quite often. Do you glean much from that? Do you watch their videos, or are you riding with those people a lot?
So in my case, I tend to be the faster of the co-drivers. It's usually I'm the co-driver, and the other person is usually the car owner. So it's more usually the other way around, where they're probably looking at my videos, or I'm helping them with car setup, or I'm helping them with with car tips and how to take this a little better. And that's what I try to do. A co-drive should have benefits for both parties, right? And if I'm not the car owner, the one thing I really strive to do, and I was, I co-drove with Noah Leslie at the Wilmington Prosolo, the spring Prosolo, and while I was driving, what I try to do is, when they walk away from this co-drive, I want to make sure that, hey, they learn something about themselves, that they can improve on, or they learn something about the car, that they can make faster or make changes to or validate, or, maybe that wasn't the right way to go with the car. That's what I try to do as a co-driver. So usually I don't pick up from them. It's usually the other way around. And speaking of co-driving, if there's anybody out there that would like some help with their setup or just how to drive or just pick up any tips, I have the luxury due to my job of being able to travel places pretty easy. So if you guys have an open seat, especially at a kind of a bigger event, but it doesn't have to be, please contact me via Facebook or email. My email is just James Yam, no capitals, no periods, at gmail.com. I might be able to fly out there and co-drive with you, and again, help you with your setup or some driving tips that you want. It's always great to go to different parts of the country that I have a bunch of friends in to go see them, as well as do some motocross. So yeah, just hit me up.
And like you were saying, when you're in a car, most likely he's going to be faster than you, but if you're already a fast guy, it's going to be great because you're going to be able to notice the differences. Maybe you do put some data on there and analyze it later, and you see how he's going to watch videos and point things out to you. That can always be helpful. Anytime somebody gets in my car and they don't have the extra time to then learn and study afterwards, I'm always wondering, hey, you could probably really take advantage of this by doing that. So definitely take him up on that offer. Remember, S2000 champion, he's won in a Corvette as well, so he's got the skills. I dare you to get him into a Civic. I don't think you have enough money probably, but you might have enough money to get him into a Civic. I mean, it might be better to get me in a Civic with you, but
yeah, go with Kings on that one. I've had some crazier things. I remember co-driving once a fellow that I met on one of the internet forums. We were co-driving in Lincoln, and he had a theory about how the car should be set up. The theory was that with the frequencies of the suspension, that the front should have softer spring rates than the rear. And again, theory to actual practice, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And that S2000, all that's going to do is make you spin faster. So I got to Lincoln on Friday, or I mean the day before. It was the spring Nats. It was a 40 event, and I got there. I'm like, hey, we need to change this up, or it's just not going to work. And it took a little bit of a leap of faith on his part, but he agreed. Unfortunately, me arriving the night before, we were staying at the Holiday Inn in Lincoln, so we parked the car in the Holiday Inn parking garage structure, and the car was up on jack stands, and we had the whole suspension ripped apart. We didn't even have an extra set of springs, so we had to take all the springs off the car and flip them front to rear just to get things to work. We did it, and that was the year Robert Thorne was running STR. We did it. I was actually leading Robert Thorne until day 2, and then I don't know. This is another classic story. No, Robert and I are good friends, and but back then I really didn't know Robert, and we just happened to luck out. This was back when Hankook had their original RS3, not the version 2, and apparently the original RS3 needed quite a lot of heat to work, and that the first 2 days of Lincoln. Lincoln being Lincoln, it's, the weather's crazy, right? It was cold. It was overcast and cold, and the Hankooks, they weren't going to work worth, squat. And luckily, I had brought a set of RS3s, but the car owner had a set of not even the right width, like 255 is the limit for STR. He had 245 Dunlops at the time, but because it was colder, we ran the Dunlops, and we were leading both morning and afternoon. And again, this is a car that we had just swapped the springs front to rear without any testing. And again, I don't know if you know much about doing stuff like that, but there's a lot of collateral changes that happen when you do that first of all, the ride heights change. So we were sitting there just kind of eyeballing things. But when you eyeball things, again, when you change height on a car, you inadvertently change the alignment settings. So again, all eyeballed. We were leading on that day. Another friend, Colin Fiedler, he was just showing up for the tour part of Spring Nats. He came with 255 Dunlops. And, I want, like I said, as any race car driver, you want to maximize what you have. So I asked Colin if I could borrow his 255 Dunlops, which he let me do. So I put those on, and Robert saw that. And then Robert asked me, can I borrow you 245 Dunlops, the ones that we were leading on the previous day? And I was a little hesitant, you're a little hesitant because, you don't want to give your chief competitor the advantage, but, me and my co-driver agreed to do it. And probably it was a bad mistake because Robert ended up winning that Prosolo. Not only did he end up winning that Prosolo, he ended up winning the Super Challenge on those tires. So, so that was a kind of a crazy Lincoln Spring National story. But the interesting end to that story was that again, Lincoln being Lincoln, for the tour portion, the day 3 and day 4 of that weekend, it got really hot, which means the Hancooks had to get put on. And so we all switched back to our Hancooks. Jason Collette had also jumped into an SC1000 for the tour. And with that crazy kind of setup that we had just cobbled together, I had won the tour with that car. So a little bittersweet weekend, gave away the win, and then but finally did take the win on the second part of Spring National.
So that makes me remember that if you're not having a co-driver, you probably want those tires that are going to work better in the cool. Was he maybe a single driver that year?
Oh, you mean the car owner?
Yeah. Well, no. Was Robert Thorne a single driver?
I don't remember if he had a coach. I think he did have. No, he did have a co-driver. He did. The Hancooks were really weird in that it not only needed heat in the tire itself, but if the surface was too cool, even heat in the tires it wasn't enough for the Hancooks to stick for some odd reason. Yeah, and again, these are things that you learn through testing, and if you don't test, you'll never learn.
Yeah, I remember just showing up to Nationals thinking, I don't need rain tires. I'm in an all-wheel drive car. And then it rains, and you're like, how much time and effort did I waste getting here to not even be able to compete?
No, unfortunately, I don't even want to bring up the whole controversy going on with, what happened fifth heat on Friday. That's a whole other conundrum. But that's the thing with showing up to Lincoln is you have to be prepared for 100-degree heat, or you have to be prepared for monsoon. I came to Nationals with 3 different sets of tires, all set up, primarily just due to the kindness of others. Someone that's been helping me a ton with my car and just with autocross in general is Henry Bjoin. And Henry, or actually Bjoin is how to say it correctly. For those that have ever seen the name, it's actually not Bjoin, it's Bjoin. But Henry's son, Nick, is the one that actually won STR the previous year. And they had a set of rain tires that they had taken to Nationals but still had available. So they let me borrow that set just in case I needed it. And then my co-driver had his set of Bridgestones, which, at that point I had not tested back between the Rival S and the Bridgestone in the damp. I had never done a back-to-back. I knew that the RE71 was quick just from the testing, and I had run one event in the damp with them. I never had a chance to run the Rival S in the damp, which turns out actually works really, really well in the damp. C Street, the winner in an ND Miata, was on BFGs, and C Street was running through damp conditions. I know another fast guy, Jason Saney. I think he had the fastest time on BFGs in C Street when it was still pretty wet. So I guess the RE70s were needed, but sometimes you have to come armed to the teeth, to win in whatever condition that Lincoln throws at you. Unfortunately, for better or for worse.
I was actually over there for C Street's action, and after Jason was a low number driver, so he came in with some smoking fast time, maybe on the second run also, and third. I went over and looked, and everybody else was doing that, walking over there. I forget how many runs and miles he said were on those Rival S's, but they were not like new. I think they drove them to the event maybe like 700 miles and lots of runs. So they weren't like they were lots of tread. They were just still good. And he happened to say, he goes, yeah, people hear one thing and they repeat it on the internet, and then everybody assumes the tire's no good, that you have to have RE71Rs for the wet. And he proved, and just like the winter, you didn't need those. Those tires were fast, and once again, he had lots of wear on them as well, and they were still quick in the damp.
Yeah, so, if you're in a region where you have the ability to test both, it's great. And if you're not, well, that's the thing with California is that, we pride ourselves in pretty much having like perfect weather all year round. But it is nice once in a while to get a day that's wet so that you can test your wet setup or test between tires that you never get a chance to.
During that downpour in the Pro, that was so much fun. I took one run, and then it was like, oh, wait, the car might be sucking water in. Don't take any more runs. I was looking forward to that. I was like, let's go see what I can do in just totally wet. Can I cut down distance? Can I slow down enough that it'll still turn? I took it as a personal challenge. Can I try to beat these guys in the wet? You can always learn something, like you're saying.
No, actually, so you guys were the last group that ran, and then it was STX and then STR, our class, that was supposed to run. I was actually looking forward to running in the wet conditions, and I was just going to stick with the Rival S just to see where again, we're going back to, is the Prosolo finale important? Definitely, to gauge where you are compared to your competitors, right? And that was going to be a really good litmus test as to what I would run should it get damp, if the Rival S was going to, hold up okay in the wet. So, unfortunately, I never got that chance because they, called the event at that point. But like you said, Jason put down some flyers in that car. So, obviously, it works well. And then, as I'm sure most people know, there is a revised Rival S coming out. And, from Andy Haas's test, it's showing that it should be faster. So, I can't wait to get my hands on a set of those and see what the difference is. And hopefully it is faster. And hopefully it's faster, but I don't really need to change my setup much. And then it'll be game on, If it's going to be faster, it's just going to benefit me more because I'm already on them. I love the contingency program that they have. I mean, I won about 20 tires this year. So it's been good.
Yeah, I mean, I ran them at pros at times just because I figured, hey, can I win on these things just to win more tires? And especially if I want to get those 335s for the GT3, it really, them doing that makes it very possible for more people to at least try them. Because if you're somewhat quick and you can adjust your setup or just drive well enough, you're going to win more of them, especially at the pros.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Nope.
So tell us,
totally agree. So
what's the favorite car you've driven out of all the cars all these years?
Oh, favorite car. I would say, I have to say it's the GT3. I'm in this kind of area where, as much as prepared and modified cars look cool, I'm just not at the point where I want to throw that much time, Obviously, they break all the time, and I don't have a garage right now even to store anything like that. But even then, I don't have the time to put together like fixing and fabricating stuff for that stuff. Those cars are fun, but where I'm at with the S2000, I've driven the Corvette. It's a great car. It just doesn't have the all-around balance that the S2000 have. It's just, to me, the Z06, or at least the C5 Z06, feels more like a big gorilla. And I like something I can kind of dance with more. And I still like to stay on street tires too. So it kind of, so when you look at it, A Street, it's been there, done that with the Corvette. So now you're looking at pretty much just like Super Street or SSR. And with that, I've kind of dabbled. I've had the benefit of having driven a couple 911s, including the same 911 that Ken Monishi drove. That's Healy's car. And, man, every time I get out of that thing, I just have a gigantic grin. That thing is like, to me, it's like an S2000 on steroids. And I love that thing. You can dance with that thing, but it just has so much power. If you do everything right and you just connect everything, there's, like I said, it just has this nice flow that you have a similar feel from the S2000, but just with way more speed and power. So at this point, I would say that's probably my favorite car.
I hope you get into one next year. That doesn't mean I hope to be in one as well against you, but yes, I wish you luck to get there. If you could drive anybody's car that's already set up, would you drive his car again, or is there something else you would dare try if you didn't have to fix it, if it was a mod car or something else?
Oh, yeah, if I can drive anything. Again, being in the SoCal region, I see the car that's taken a mod national championship twice now consecutively. That's KJ Christopher's car. Marshall Grice was co-driving this year and won it. But, again, seeing that car all the time, even seeing the video, it's just mind-blowing how fast that thing goes through corners. It just defies, to me, it just seems to defy physics. Something like that, I think, is an awesome car. Unfortunately, I do see all the pain that KJ goes through. Lots of little things break. Something just broke this last event. The other thing that interests me too is B-Mod, which is just like A-Mod Junior, really, with a motorcycle engine in it. Still has all the aero. Sounds so cool with that high revving motorcycle engine in there. So A or B mod would definitely probably take the cake in terms of like what I would want to drive. And specifically though, it would probably be KJ's car.
I never thought I'd want to drive a mod, but you just lit the light bulb for me. That's all I needed. I would be making these little tight turns if I had enough downforce. I must be ready.
Well, you better be ready to take slaloms that literally double the speed that you're used to, because that's what it pretty much looks like when I see his in-car video. It's like, I just see him turn the wheel, and, you're just thinking, there's no way he's going to make it. And it just makes it. It's amazing.
If only he could take co-driver or co-riders along for the sheer, ecstasy of that.
Oh, I would love. I would love just to ride in that thing. Oh my gosh, not even to drive it, just to see what it's like to do. I think KJ told me that it pulls on an autocross course you can still pull 2.5 Gs or something like that.
Wow,
it's insane.
And for you being a pilot, that's the logical step. I mean, you can pull those Gs. You've got wings. I think it's your call. I think it's your calling.
Yeah. Well, maybe when the cash is flowing in a little bit better, but as much as all those mod and prepared cars look cool, I just I couldn't deal with all the breakage that those guys go through.
Exactly, like you said, you can drive your car out or have someone trailer it out, or you could trailer it like you did this year. But those guys are trailering out their cars and all the spare parts, and I like cars that just run, hopefully, most all the time.
Oh yeah, and that's as much as I love ST Kinch, I actually love street or stock before it was street, because there's a lot of things you can change on ST, and so you can get the advantage by doing it correctly, right? Setting it up correctly, but then you can really hose yourself by completely botching your setup, right? Whereas street, everybody's in the same car, and there's just small differences with shocks, but it's more a driver's race than it is the car, and that's what I kind of miss about street. It's almost there with STR because a lot of our setups are pretty similar now, but me, and that's why the whole race tire versus street tire debate for me, like, I mean, I was always on the street tire side because it's not about how much grip you have. If everybody has the same amount of grip level, that doesn't matter. To me, it's just, it's, as long as it's all about the competition. It's all about who's the better driver for me. If the Hoosiers, if you could have driven them, I mean, I guess you can kind of to a certain point drive them on the street now more. But I mean, 5-6 years ago, they were way more fragile. You didn't want to put heat cycles on them at all. You didn't want to drive on the street. I mean, if it just sprinkled, you'd really be screwed. So there was all that going on. But again, going back to just talking about street really quick, I love the fact that it's more about the driver than about the car, about the tires, about the setup.
It sounds like you want a spec class, so I'll count your vote that we need some more spec classes.
I don't mind spec class. B Street was a spec class the couple of years that I was running it, and I liked that. I liked the fact that it was, it was just man to man, instead of who spent more money on their tune or, who, spent more money on four-way adjustable shocks or stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I know that it's something I don't get on the boards and discuss that stuff, but I would love to still have Miatas versus Miatas, and then Civics and CRXs can play and may set a minimum weight. I just think we'd have like 60 of each car at Nationals. I think that you'd have so many people not worried about which one's going to be fastest because you never know, but they just all assumed, I better sell mine, I better sell that, get a CRX, get this. It's so crazy to me how everybody jumps from one to another. And once again, it's just like tires. There's so many assumptions. You don't know until you test them all. And only a couple of these people have tested Miatas and Civics or CRXs and Civics, so... yeah.
Hopefully the stage for next year will be a little bit more stable. I know the Rival S, the reconstruction is out, but I mean they didn't change the compound, so it's just supposed to feel better to be able to drive it faster. And then I don't think, as far as I've heard, there's no changes for the Bridgestone. And then otherwise, I haven't heard any real news from any other tire manufacturer. So hopefully this year it'll be pretty, kind of like what it's been this year, pretty stable in terms of what tires are available for us at least. So.
Exactly. That's the one thing I get into street now, or the street tire area. It's like, whoa, I just sit back and wait. Like who can give some input on which ones are doing which? Are you changing your setup and just try to find one that's competitive? I thank you. I thank you for the time. Do you have anybody you want to thank? Any sponsors or anything?
Well, definitely some people. First and foremost, I already mentioned him earlier. I'd like to give a big thanks to Henry Bjoin for all the help he's given me. He's even actually loaned me some of the parts from his STR National Championship winning car that I could borrow for Nationals. So part of the speed of my car is from his. Also like to thank Karwan of Karcepts. Brian's been hooking me up with some of his awesome parts. Nobody engineers parts like Brian. And let me tell you, like, I mean this in the best way possible. Brian is very, very attention driven. So whatever he puts out, that it has a lot of thought and engineering in. Also like to thank Gernby, which is an E-tuner that's tuned my car. Car's made great power. I'd like to shout out for West End Alignment. They've been awesome as well, and it's the biggest group of awesome autocrossers, Cal Club. I know there's that running joke at Guam for a while, but I mean, Cal Club is my home, and love running with these guys. I love the events that we have. So, I appreciate having me for this interview, Ken.
Yeah, no, thanks. I think you had lots of good information. I mean, you opened my eyes to some things.
I guess what I would say that I'm good at is the memorization thing that I told you I do. allows me to kind of map out what the course looks like before I get there, so that I can take that turn pretty close to 100% on that first run. Cutting distance in sweepers is key. You might be able to stay out and then take a more classic racing line, and it may help you. But again, when you're doing this in 3 runs, there's more margin for error doing that. That's why the Civics dominated for as long as they have. Big thanks to Henry Bjoin for all the help he's given me. He's even actually loaned me some of the parts from his STR National Championship winning car.
Thanks for listening. For the show notes and contact information, please visit autocrosstalk.com. There you can also subscribe so that we can keep you up to date on new shows as they come out. Also, please leave us a review on iTunes and subscribe on iTunes for the upcoming shows. You can connect to our Facebook page at facebook.com/autocrosstalk. You can share your thoughts, your insights, your questions, your suggestions there. Also share with your friends. Hopefully you found it entertaining and motivating, and hopefully other people will as well. It's been fun, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for listening, and check back next week for the next show.